Speed is usually one of the most important stats in Fire Emblem. It's the only stat that can reliably be leveraged both offensively and defensively, as it allows you to double your damage output when you double slower enemies, prevents you from getting doubled by faster enemies, and even in some games adds to your avoid to allow you to dodge attacks. Oftentimes, the speed threshold that a unit falls into can make the difference between completely unviable and absolutely game dominating. While speed is usually not enough to salvage an otherwise poor unit, see the majority of Sword Masters in the series, a lack of speed can often be the nail in the coffin for an otherwise just middling unit. See most Armor Knights in the series. There is much to be said about the centralizing nature of speed, and if you're interested in a discussion on that topic, my friend Akira has a video coming out this Sunday, which goes more in depth on the topic, so be sure you subscribe to their channel so you don't miss it. For our purposes, however, the bigger question is, what if you were always at a significant speed detriment? Because that is the central gimmick of today's hack, Doubled or Nothing by Archer Bias. Part 1. The gimmick. So, Doubled or Nothing is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a game where you get doubled. You get doubled a lot. All of your units have a 0 base speed and a 0% speed growth. All of the enemies have at least 4 attack speed, and the doubling threshold is, you guessed it, 4. This means that you will get doubled by every single enemy in the game. And I'm including ballisticians and siege tome users there. Everyone means everyone. Now, the immediate knock-on effect of this is that your units end up taking a lot more damage than you might be used to, and so, as you can expect, the game is pretty player phase heavy, with enemy phasing being very dangerous since everyone is able to double you. However, because speed is also an offensive stat, your ability to player phase is significantly hampered in comparison to even other player phase heavy games. You really do feel like you're at a disadvantage at all times, so leveraging the tools you have available in order to achieve victory is all the more satisfying. Sometimes those tools come in the form of unique items, such as the speed boosting rings, each of which will give you a point of speed in exchange for penalizing you in one of your other stats, such as attack or defense. These rings won't allow you to double, but they do stop you from getting doubled by 4, 5, or 6 speed enemies depending on how many you stack. However, the trade-off can be a big deal depending on the situation you're in. And sometimes that tool is making use of features of the map, because the maps are, as is usual for Archer Bias, expertly designed. From a lava map where your group starts divided in half, to an escape map where your lord is separated from the rest of the army, to a library where you are surrounded on all sides by scary enemies. Each of these maps will test your ability to manipulate the terrain and take advantage of choke points or enemy positioning. This culminates in a variation of the Fire Emblem 7 final map, where the doors to the Dreadlords open, only there is a vertical wall separating your army in half, so you have to send half of the army to the left and half of the army to the right, making sure to divide them in such a way that they can all work well together. Of course, knowing the ideal way in which to divide your army means that you are taking full advantage of the most powerful tool you have available, the units. And with that, I actually want to take a deep dive into every single member of the cast. Part 2. The cast. Normally, I wouldn't do a deep dive into the entire cast of a ROM hack, but there are only 14 playable characters, and I think they all represent interesting approaches to how to make a unit useful in a zero-speed environment, as every single member of the cast has a unique niche in the gameplay. I'll start by talking about the units who are closer to vanilla, such as Lass, the main lord. She is a sword mercenary who has a story promotion into a bow knight. She's one of only 2 sword users available, and she's the one with better combat stats, so as a result you tend to want to give her the best swords. And right from the outset, she starts with a brave sword in her inventory. It only has 3 might, but because it hits twice, she can pack quite the punch on player phase. Another notable sword is the Sunrise Blade, which gives +3 speed and ignores the weapon triangle, as well as the Brave Blade, which is Lass's personal weapon that she gets near the end of the game, which is a 12 might Brave weapon, but when it's equipped, it significantly reduces her defenses, cementing her as a player phase unit. Tobias the Archer also seems like a go-to player phase option, as he has a very high strength stat and growth, and can attack from 2 range so he doesn't face any counters. Additionally, dealing effective damage to flyers helps him secure one-shots since you are not going to be able to double them. However, partway through the game you get a bow called the Spell's Bane, which deals effective damage against all magical classes and also increases your resistance by a significant amount in exchange for a reduction in physical defense. This can allow him to enemy phase groups of mages if you're able to properly position to allow him to counter at 2 range. Of course, he's fighting over this bow with Kiwi, who is the horse-mounted archer who joins at the same time you get it. At first glance, she seems like a strict upgrade to Tobias. They have similar combat capabilities and she is on a horse. However, her weapon level is only D, meaning she misses out on a couple of bows, most notably the longbow, and will need to grind her weapon rank if she wants to be able to attack 1-2 range units without counter. Still, you don't want to overlook the benefits of a horse, as she is one of only 3 units who is mounted prior to promotion. The second of which is Verona, the Cavalier. And while her combat stats are not great, being on a mount grants its own form of utility, and access to both swords and lances is a devastating weapon combination. The Sunrise Blade can prevent her from getting doubled by slower enemies, and the Horse Slayer can let her deal effective damage to other horses. Of course, with her middling strength stat, she sometimes fails to hit run-round thresholds even with effective damage, which is why I usually put the Horse Slayer on Simon, the Soldier, who is just a soldier, but he has a cracked strength stat. This, in combination with effective damage from Horseslayer, means that he was my go-to for deleting Cavaliers, and oftentimes I would allow him to enemy phase since he would one-shot them in retaliation, taking less damage in the process. Remember kids, you can't get doubled if you kill the enemy before their second attack. Of course, the other approach to enemy phasing is just to have high defense. 0 times 2 is still 0 after all, which is why the Jagan of this game is a heavy paladin, something reminiscent of a great knight, Caloris. He's good in all of the ways you would expect a Jagan to be good. He's incredibly bulky even when he's getting doubled, and has access to a silver axe at base. He does technically also have lance access as well, but it starts out at E rank, and I used axes so often that over the course of the 10-chapter campaign, I never actually even hit D lances. Your mileage may vary, but I didn't find lances especially useful on him. Still, he has good mobility and high defense, so he is a very helpful member of your army, especially early on, and one of the only units who can reliably take hits. The other one, of course, being Otto, the full-on armor knight, who has even more defense than Caloris does. Since everyone is getting doubled anyway, the normal downside of being an armor knight doesn't apply, which just makes Otto one of the best frontliners. Otto doesn't do anything fancy, he just has generically good tanky combat, but tanky combat is incredibly valuable in a world where everyone is getting doubled. It is worth noting that the cast has fixed supports similar to Thracia, with several units joining with C support with each other, and Otto is the only unit who has a B support with his boyfriend Thoril. Thoril is the dark mage of the game, and at this point I want to talk about the other really cool thing Doubled or Nothing does. It makes magic incredibly interesting and unique. You get one user of each school of magic, Dark, Light, and Anima, and each school has unique tomes that have special effects beyond just being a specific might weapon. In the case of Thoril the Dark Mage, he has access to Ulman, which is a brave tome that significantly reduces his defense, Eclipse, which will cut the enemy's HP in half, which is quite useful when your damage output is limited from the fact that you can't double them, and Jormungand, which will poison the enemy, which doesn't sound very useful, except for poison deals 5 damage fixed per turn. This goes both ways, however, and if any of your units get poisoned, they are also going to be taking 5 damage, and that can be very threatening. The other schools of magic have been similarly reworked. Christ, the Anima Mage, has access to the Dying Blaze Tome, which has 17 might and deals effective damage to monsters, but only has 8 durability. She can use this to enemy phase pretty effectively, as after one hit she will delete whoever fights her, and therefore she isn't going to get doubled. But with only 8 uses, you want to make sure you make everyone count. The last, or I guess in join order first, mage that we have available is Marion, the Light Mage. And she comes with Guardian, which is a tome that increases her defense by 8 and gives her an Iron Rune effect, and Resire, which is just Nosferatu, but it's been given back to light magic, where it firmly belongs. Technically, you can consider staffing the 4th school of magic, and Andreas the Staffer doesn't have anything fancy about him, but staffing is incredibly valuable because, again, your units are going to take a lot of damage, and you want to make full use of the player phase in order to delete threatening enemies, so Andreas is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. It is also worth noting that promotion comes incredibly late in this hack, which means he will be the only healer on your team for a very long time. Rayford the Condontary is basically an axe fighter, but has a personal bolt hammer, which is a 1-2 range magical hammer that deals effective damage to armors. In my opinion, she is the least interesting member of the cast, but that's probably partially biased by the fact that Polyf the Manakete joins on the same map as her. They have access to 3 different Dragonstones: the Firestone, which boosts physical bulk, the Mage Stone, which boosts resistance, and the Ice Stone, which doesn't boost either of them, but gives 2-3 range. Managing what Dragonstone is equipped at what time is incredibly important for their survival, and they can be a very valuable member of the team, but only if you use them properly. And then last, but certainly not least, this is an Archer Bias hack, so you know Puzan was going to show up. He is a thief this time around, and while his combat stats are not great, so you're probably not giving him any of the valuable swords, he has access to the Knave Knife, which is only usable by him and grants plus 12 speed. This means that he is the only unit who is realistically able to double. It is also a 1-2 range weapon reminiscent of the knives in Tellius, specifically Radiant Dawn, and using it serves as an example of just how much your units are hurt by their lack of speed. He often deals significant amounts of damage despite his mediocre combat stats, specifically because he is the only member of the army who is capable of doubling. Now, this hack allows for full deployment on every chapter, and I was consistently impressed at how well everyone felt like they were contributing on every map. Nobody was really dead weight, as everyone had important niches to fill, although Tobias was pretty clearly given a significant amount of favoritism, which I guess because the hack creator's name is Archer Bias is to be expected. But seriously, Tobias is the only character to get speed on promotion. It's kind of unfair. Just kidding, it's not unfair. Tobias deserves all of the favoritism. On the topic of promotion, all of the promotions are a little bit wacky. I mentioned that the Mercenary Lord promotes into Bow Knight, and I won't spoil any of the others, but they're all really cool in my opinion. And most of them go in very unexpected directions. Now, I spent the last 9 minutes gushing about how well designed the cast is, so let's close this out with some final thoughts and a recommendation, alright? Part 3. Final thoughts and recommendations. I mentioned it briefly earlier, but the maps in this game are all very strong. My personal favorite is the library map where you are surrounded on all 4 sides and need to push out to make room to protect yourself, but a couple of other standouts are a Thracia escape map where your lord is separated from everyone else, and a lava map where you have 2 groups that have to fend for themselves while pushing forward to get to a chest before a thief can. Overall, the game really rewards aggressive play, and if that's the sort of playstyle you are into, you will have a grand old time with Doubled or Nothing. Fans of puzzle games, especially those I showed off in my previous video, will also likely enjoy Doubled or Nothing. While it is not a strict puzzle game itself, it does have puzzle-like attributes, such as managing resources. Everything comes at a trade-off, and figuring out what trade-offs are worth it and what ones are not has a sort of puzzle-esque quality. And, of course, I would recommend Doubled or Nothing to anyone who has an interest in the mechanics of Fire Emblem, as it is a good showcase of just how much you can do with the speed stat, or absence thereof. Archer Bias is definitely my favorite gimmick hacker, and if you're interested in some of their other works, I would definitely recommend Bases and Brigands, or the upcoming Unexpected Caller, which is a gimmick hack where every chapter will be a map from vanilla Fire Emblem, but altered significantly to feel like a very different experience. For example, New Resolve gets turned into a map where you start on the opposite end and have to visit all of the villages, each of which has a boss guarding it. Before we close out, I do want to thank all of my patrons, including the pre-promote tier, which contains Jamie Collins, Marin Karen, Thick Molder, George Grenville the 7th PM, Danielle Kalaskis, Anya, Emery LaFleur, and Tailored Muffin. Your support is what makes it possible for me to have the best job I've ever had. playing Fire Emblem. There's a link to my Patreon below, and it comes with a lot of benefits, such as the ability to vote on future videos, or a free S-support pairing on my current Sabotage Rev run. Of course, please only subscribe to the Patreon if you are financially capable of doing so. I don't want anyone struggling on account of Fire Emblem videos. If you want to support me for free, you can always like this video or click subscribe so you don't miss any new uploads. Regardless of what you do though, I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay safe, everyone.